It's Tuesday, November 18th, 2025. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Granthermes. Today on the show, the vote to release the Epstein files is happening as I'm recording, but basically we already know the outcome here. The House of Representatives is going to vote to release these files, sending it over to the Senate. Now, before we get to that vote, we need to talk about the absolutely wild weekend of panic and the reversals from the president and congressional Republicans over this vote to release the files, and then we can talk about what happens next, because after today, there is still a long way to go. But first, make sure you're following or subscribe to the show wherever you listen to it, or if you're watching it on YouTube, subscribe there. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack for just $5 a month or $50 for the entire year. Right now is a really good time to sign up because Make It Make Sense was just named one of the top 100 news Substacks out of thousands this week. And as always, share the show on social media. It's Mims News Pod. It's MIMS News Pod, all one word on every platform. I am at Granthermes on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Granthermes TV on everything else. All right, let's get to the show. You know, with the holidays around the corner, we're all going to parties, whether it's with your family, maybe it's a Friendsgiving, or the office holiday party where you're never really sure what to bring. Well, cookies will always do the trick. And with Molly B's gourmet cookies, you can bring bold, artistic craft cookies to your next party or even just to your own pantry. Each cookie is made in small batches to ensure a melt-in-your-mouth texture, exceptional quality, and unforgettable flavors. The Straight Fire, the one I like, marshmallows, chocolate, cinnamon cereal, and just a little bit of cinnamon whiskey. The Be Cordial is a delicious blend of chocolate and cherry. Or the Naughty Cookie, just in time for the holidays. It's a rich, warm chocolate, a subtle hint of spice, topped with fluffy mini marshmallows. It is the perfect balance of naughty and nice for this season. So whether gifting or just indulging on your own, Molly B's cookies elevate any moment, bringing gourmet delight to your pantry with no cookie shop required. And now you can enjoy an exclusive discount with my promo code MIMS25 at Molly B's to get 10% off your next order. Now, Make It Make Sense does get a commission off that sale, but you get to support the show and you can wow all your guests at your next party. Molly B's gourmet cookies, bold, unforgettable flavors. They're the ultimate treat for any occasion. Now, like I said, as I'm recording this, the House is voting on the bill to force the Department of Justice to release the files it has on the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein and his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. It's important to say that these are not the same files that were released last week by the House Oversight Committee, which is conducting its own investigation. Those files were from the Epstein estate. Now, could the DOJ have these same emails and documents? Absolutely. But they're also likely to have more. And the push to get these files from the DOJ isn't just about these specific documents for what they are in their own sake, but what kind of information did Attorney General Pam Bondi say she had on her desk? How long has the DOJ had it? And why are they still holding on to it after promising to release it? And now, I know there are people, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson included, who are going to say the Biden administration had this stuff too, and they didn't release it either. And I'm going to talk about that in a second because it is a point that's worth talking about as we talk about all of this. But before we get into all that craziness and this back and forth from Trump and Republicans, you should know what is exactly in this bill to release the files. And I'm going to read it right from the bill's congressional record here. And I know this is going to feel a little long and a little technical, but I think it's important that you hear exactly what's in it. So, this bill says the DOJ must publicly disclose all unclassified records, documents, communications, and investigative materials in its possession that relate to Epstein or Maxwell. The records include unclassified records referring to or relating to Epstein's detention and death, flight logs of aircraft owned or used by Epstein, individuals named in connection with Epstein's criminal activities, civil settlements or immunity or plea agreements, immunity deals, sealed settlements, or plea bargains of Epstein or his associates, entities with ties to Epstein's trafficking or financial networks, and internal Department of Justice communications considering decisions to investigate or charge Epstein and his associates. However, under the amended bill, DOJ may withhold or redact portions of records with written justification that such portions contain 1. Victim's personally identifiable information, 2. Child sexual abuse materials, 3. Images of death, physical abuse, or injury, 4. information which could jeopardize an active federal investigation or prosecution. Or 5, classified information. DOJ may not withhold or redact records on the basis of embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity. And like I said, I know that's a lot to take in all at once here, but essentially what this means is that victims' personal information will be protected, child pornography will not be released, and the DOJ can't withhold information just because it could be damaging to people like the president. Now, when it came to who signed this bill to get it released, every Democrat signed it, and just 4 Republicans did. Thomas Massie from Kentucky, who wrote the bill, Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, who we'll talk about in a second, Lauren Boebert from Colorado, and Nancy Mace from South Carolina. Those 2 I talked about last week because they're both assault survivors, and Trump tried to pressure them into changing their vote. Now, when they didn't do that, when they didn't change their vote, Trump decided to do 2 things. The first was order the DOJ to open investigations into former President Bill Clinton, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, and Epstein's lawyer Reed Weingarten, because their names were all over the recent release of documents. And to be fair to this here, Donald Trump is mentioned 1,628 times, according to a searchable database of the 20,000 documents that were released last week that was created by the outlet Courier. That's more than anyone else in those documents, including Epstein himself. But obviously, this DOJ isn't going to open an investigation into this president. But what it does mean here is that because there are now open investigations, a lot of the things in the Epstein files could be part of those investigations, and under the bill to release the files, that means they don't have to be released. And generally, the DOJ doesn't release files that are part of an active case. It's actually part of the reason why the Biden administration didn't release them, because Ghislaine Maxwell's case was ongoing and then was on appeal while Biden was in office. The other thing Trump did was tell Republicans in the House to vote to release the files after months of calling it a hoax, suing outlets or saying he was going to for accurate reporting, having the FBI redact his name from files, and having Pam Bondi hold up the release of any files. He just does an about face. It was wildly unexpected, but Trump here is starting to realize that if he can't beat him, he's got to join him. Polling from the firm Morning Consult out today found that 60% of Americans believe Trump knew about Epstein's network of abuse, and nearly 40% think Trump participated in it. And now, we know that Trump doesn't really care about people who aren't his voters. So among Republicans, 42% said they think Trump knew about Epstein. That's more than any other category. And 14% said he was part of it. Those are not good numbers for the president, and means he's losing his grip on the party here because of the Epstein files. In fact, it's been the one issue that has been able to tear MAGA voters away from Trump. And it's here that I kind of have to ask, what did Trump think was going to happen here? Since Epstein's death, releasing the files has been a rallying cry that the MAGA movement has used constantly. Trump promised to release the files on the campaign trail, and so did J.D. Vance. And when they didn't, as story after story has been released that make the president look bad, they continued to call it a hoax, going back on their word. So what did Trump think his supporters were going to think when he didn't jump to release these files? But all of this clearly got to the president over the weekend, because he started to say that he wasn't involved at all with Epstein, which we know isn't true. He started calling it a Democrat problem, which very much might be true. He snapped at a reporter on Air Force One in a disgusting fashion who asked him about why he wouldn't just release the files. Here it is.
Sir, if there's nothing incriminating in the files, sir, why are you saying this?
So, if you couldn't hear that, a reporter is trying to ask Trump if there's nothing incriminating in the files, why not just release them? And then he says, "Quiet, Piggy," while putting his finger in her face. Now, clearly, this is absolutely not what you want a president to do. It wasn't okay when Joe Biden personally insulted a Fox News reporter, calling him a stupid son of a bitch. And now, this isn't okay either. It also fits a pattern of how Trump treats women, and I kind of can't help but wonder if him living in the headspace of the Epstein files and likely reliving his time with Epstein in his head, which was considerable, if this isn't a little Freudian slip of what his time partying with Epstein was like and the way that they treated women. Now then, in an even more bizarre statement, yesterday, Trump said he would sign the bill to release the files. And full disclosure here, I have shortened some of this answer for time.
I believe that some of the people that we mentioned are being looked at very seriously for their relationship to Jeffrey Epstein, but they were with him all the time. I wasn't at all. And we'll see what happens. I don't. They can do whatever they want. We'll give them everything. Sure, I would. Let the Senate look at it. Let anybody look at it. But don't talk about it too much, because honestly, I don't want to take it away from us. It's really a Democrat.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. But first of all, Trump is clearly under the weather here. He sounds bad. He looks tired. There's makeup on his hands again, and they are visibly swollen this time. That's a new thing I don't think I've seen before. But Trump is also lying here about not spending time with Epstein. He spent a lot of time with him, so much so that one of the victims told Epstein in an email that she was worried he might just be hanging around his house when she showed up. Now, the more important part here is obviously that Trump says he's going to sign the bill, which means either he's now come full circle on this or he's planning on the Senate to block it. But the thing is, Trump could just order the DOJ to release the files right now. If he is this supportive of this bill, he doesn't have to wait for it to make it through Congress and then get to his desk in a few weeks, if not maybe more than a month. He could just do it. So then the question becomes, why wouldn't he? And that's an answer he has yet to give. So that all gets us to today, where survivors and the backers of this discharge bill met in front of the Capitol to call in members of Congress to vote to release all these files. And among those was Haley Robson, who had a message directly for the president. And I'm going to play this out in full because it's worth hearing in full.
And to the President of the United States of America, who is not here today, I want to send a clear message to you. While I do understand that your position has changed on the Epstein files, and I'm grateful that you have pledged to sign this bill, I can't help to be skeptical of what the agenda is. So with that being said, I want to relay this message to you. I am traumatized. I am not stupid. I am traumatized. I am not stupid. You have put us through so much stress, the lockdowns, the halt of these procedures that were supposed to have happened 50 days ago. The Adelita Grijalva who waited to get sworn in and then get upset when your own party goes against you because what is being done is wrong. It's not right. For your own self-serving purposes, this is America. This is land of the free. Land of the free. In 1863, we have a woman on top of the Capitol building represent freedom. I do not feel free today.
That is a powerful message, and worth noting that the president didn't make an appearance at this event to support these survivors, some of whom voted for him. And then after Robson, we also heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who for her entire time in Congress, the last 5 years, she's been one of Trump's biggest champions until just this last week, because over the weekend, Trump withdrew his endorsement of her for the 2026 midterms, and then he called her Marjorie Trader Greene, and then Marjorie Taylor Brown, because when green things die, they turn brown. It's not one of his better ones, admittedly. But she basically said good riddance. In her speech today, she actually implied the president was a traitor.
First. And he called me a traitor for standing with these women and refusing to take my name off the discharge petition. Let me tell you what a traitor is. A traitor is an American that serves foreign countries and themselves. A patriot is an American that serves the United States of America and Americans like the women standing behind me.
A few months ago, it was unthinkable that Greene would be the person to break like this with Trump, or break with him at all, really. Now, it's worth pointing out that while this was going on, Trump was preparing to meet with the dictatorial ruler of Saudi Arabia, who Trump has been very cozy with and who is actively promising billion-dollar deals with the Trump family organization on everything from crypto to real estate projects. So that's kind of what Greene was aiming at there. But Trump, nonetheless, has done an about-face on releasing the files, and so has the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Now, Johnson said during the Republican press conference today that he wasn't reversing his stance, but that just doesn't ring true. Back in July, he sent the House into recess early to avoid a vote on releasing the files. And then he waited a full 7 weeks to swear in a newly elected representative who was promising to be the final signature to get the vote to release the files. And then today, he said he actually has real objections to this bill and then laid them out on this handy chart. And I'm going to go through them right now. First, he says the petition doesn't adequately protect victims. The survivors themselves have said it does, and there are explicit instructions to make sure personal information of the victims and survivors is protected. Second, Johnson says releasing the files could create new victims because it could make people guilty by association. And again, to be clear, we shouldn't want innocent people convicted of anything they didn't do. But Johnson also said in the press conference that if there's any scintilla, that's a quote, of any person involved in Epstein's crimes, they should be brought to justice. So, which one does he want here? Third, he says it fails to adequately protect the release of child pornography, even though it explicitly says the DOJ must not release anything that could be classified as child sexual abuse material or CSAM. Johnson said here that the law that the petition cites or the bill cites isn't the proper law, but then didn't say which one was. Now, I looked it up, and both the laws that are in this release bill define what CSAM is and what it would mean to send it out, but seem pretty clearly to prevent the releasing of it by passing this bill. So I don't know where Johnson's coming from there. The last two reasons are related. Johnson says he thinks that the release is bad because they could jeopardize ongoing investigations or national security. Now, up until last week, when the president ordered new investigations, there weren't ongoing ones surrounding the Epstein or Maxwell cases. And the bill does say that only unclassified information can be released. And this is really where the release of the most important parts of these files could get blocked. First, because like I said before, the DOJ tends not to release information during active investigations. And then we get this idea of national security. I've talked before on this show about how the U.S. has a problem with overclassifying or making too many things classified that just don't need to be by any reasonable standard. And that could easily happen here because so much of this is up to the Attorney General as to what's classified and what's not. Now, Pam Bondi could then make the most damning things classified, which means they cannot be released publicly. She'd also have to provide written reasons as to why she did that to Congress, but generally, you're not going to argue with the Attorney General when they say something is too sensitive to be released. But at the end of it all, Johnson called the bill to release the files a political show and then said this.
And I'm going to point out again, when the authors were asked to fix it, they said they weren't interested in doing that. Okay, why? Because this is a raw and obvious political exercise. Again, I'm just going to leave you with this question. You should go ask them all. If you were so concerned about the Epstein files and protecting the victims, why didn't you do a darn thing about it for the 4 years of the Biden administration? All this stuff was sitting in a warehouse, and nobody said a word about it. They didn't care.
So again, it's worth pointing out that the Ghislaine Maxwell case was ongoing under Joe Biden. In fact, her appeal was only shot down by the Supreme Court last month to put an end to it. And if we're going by the logic that he's using here, that a president could have and should have released these files, then the same would go for Trump's first administration and the last 11 months. Now, I do want to be clear in saying that the renewed Democratic focus on this, because it's a way to push back on Trump, instead of it being solely about justice for the survivors, is something that Democratic voters should also force their elected officials to answer to. But it should also be clear, again, like I said before, that the Democrats didn't make this part of their political identity in the way Republicans did for the last 6 years. And actually, this is a good time here. I've got some breaking news. As I'm recording, the House has just passed this bill to release the Epstein files. The vote is 427 yes votes, 1 no vote. It looks like that is Clay Higgins from Louisiana. And 5 members didn't vote at all, 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats, but I don't know who they are right now. And this is actually a good time to move on here. Sorry, there's a little live stuff here. This is a good time to move on here because we need to talk about what happens now. So next, this thing goes to the Senate, where Mike Johnson has said that he's been working with the leader of the Senate, John Thune, to essentially put up roadblocks to get this passed based on all those things that I just talked about that Johnson had up on this handy chart. Here's what he said.
So what am I to do as a leader in a situation like this? I call my counterpart in the Senate, Leader Thune, and I talked him through this with him and shared our deep concerns. And of course, they share those concerns as well. And so I'm very confident that when this moves forward in the process, if and when it is processed in the Senate, which there's no certainty that that will be, that they will take the time methodically to do what we have not been allowed to do in the House, to amend this discharge petition and to make sure that these protections are there. The authors of the discharge did not allow us to do that here. That's the rules here. But in the Senate, they can correct it.
So, first of all, if and when is a pretty key phrase there that I'll talk about in a second. But also, for the Speaker of the House, the leader of the House of Representatives, to say that he hasn't been allowed to do something is pretty rich. I mean, like, he got overruled by his whole branch of Congress here, but still, whatever. So let's get to what he actually said. Is it uncommon for the leaders from both the House and the Senate to talk to each other like this? Not really, though usually they like to keep things separate from one another. But there's kind of no denying that this actually feels much more like Johnson and Majority Leader John Thune in the Senate are scheming with one another. Because if the Senate doesn't pass this, then Trump never has to put his name on it. And making amendments would also mean drawing out this entire process through the Thanksgiving holiday for sure, but specifically, it would put a vote on the Epstein files on a collision course with the promise that Thune made to Democrats to vote on health care by the second week of December so they would vote to end the shutdown, which means, and just to play out a little bit of congressional chess here, Thune could offer up to Democrats a choice between either voting for the release of the files or for the health care reforms they wanted that caused the government to shut down, but not both. And then again, there's no guarantee that even if they chose health care on that the House would do anything with that health care bill anyway. But in the end, what all this means is that the files and the survivors looking for justice just become another political football to be punted back and forth. And the last thing I want to leave you with today is actually what Representative Thomas Massie, the author of the bill to release the files, said today on the House floor before the vote, that this issue shouldn't be part of the game of politics because it's not. It's not just about these specific survivors or even Epstein and his circle of disgusting friends, but what Congress and the Senate and the White House do on this is a message to all survivors in the country about whether their government actually cares about them.
But it's not just a victory today if this vote prevails for those survivors. It's a victory for every person, man or woman, boy or girl, who's been victimized sexually in this country. Anybody who's been a victim of sexual assault, or maybe they've been victimized by a family member. Maybe it's not a billionaire, but they're all waiting and watching to see what we do today. They're wondering, if I go to mom or dad, will anything happen? If I go to the sheriff, will anything happen? Well, we have a chance today to make something happen. Something that's not happened, something that should have happened decades ago, and that is to get justice for these victims and survivors and transparency for America. That's what this vote is about today.
All right. That is it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on. Like and subscribe. Leave a comment below if you're a watcher on YouTube. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack, where you can read the brand new article I got up last week on Friday, where I went through thousands of documents that were released from the Epstein estate, and I pulled out the most important things that you need to know from that, but that is just for paid subscribers. It is just $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, which is a deal there. If you want to become a subscriber and read that article and all the other great bonus content I've got on the Substack, that's how you do it. If you don't, I get it, but please share the show on social media. It's Mims News Pod. That's MIMS News Pod, all one word, on every platform. I am at Granthermes on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Granthermes TV on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Granthermes, and I'll talk to you on Thursday.